What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the NH Experience, and I have a very special guest on this episode. I'm honored to have this gentleman on the show. He is the Negro League Baseball Museum's first director of marketing back in 1998. He was later named the VP of marketing in 2009. In 2011, he also helped orchestrate more than $10 million turnaround that has helped the Negro League Baseball Museum regain its vitality and financial stability. So this guest is a financial genius. I know he won't say it, but I'm going to say it for him. He is responsible for creating several educational programs regarding the Negro League Baseball Museum. He is a true historian of the Negro Leagues. And just recently, this year, the MLB and the MLBPA donated $1 million to the Negro League Baseball Museum. And in this year, which was supposed to be this season, we were going to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the Negro Leagues. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to have this man. He's the president of the Negro League Baseball Museum, Mr. Bob Kendrick. How are you, sir?
Nick, man, I'm doing good. I'm doing good. It's great to be with you. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, thank you for coming on. First things first, I have to ask you, growing up, what got you into baseball? What captured your attention that you wanted to go the baseball route? Because I know later on in college you played some basketball, but you were steadfast with baseball.
Yeah, well, I think as a kid growing up in Crawfordville, Georgia, you played whatever was in season. And so baseball has always been a part of my family. My father introduced me to the game. My brothers all played baseball, although it wasn't in an organized capacity. Back then it was called hardball, and the guys would get together and you play the local town team, and I'm a kid and I'm watching them, and you wanted to do and emulate whatever your brothers did. And like I said, my father was a baseball fan. I became a baseball fan. I taught myself how to read a box score out of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and just fell in love with the game. My town was too small, however, to field a high school baseball team. Crawfordville, Georgia, which is east of Atlanta, west of Augusta, all of about 500 people, man. Yeah, and so we had two sports in high school, track and basketball. And anybody who knows me know I don't believe in doing any running if it didn't involve a ball in it, and if a ball wasn't involved with it. And so I moved to basketball and was very fortunate enough to get a basketball scholarship to Park College, which is now Park University, NAIA level basketball. And that's what brought me out to the Midwest. And I've been here ever since. And really, that's how I kind of stumbled into my affiliation with the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. That was 27 years ago when that happened. And so been involved with this project for quite some time.
Now, who did you follow growing up? I know you said you played basketball. Yeah. Obviously, you guys play unorganized baseball, but who are some of the players that you recognize or were heroes to you?
Oh, man, it starts and finishes with one, Henry Aaron.
Okay.
Henry Aaron. And so Henry Aaron is my childhood idol, my all-time favorite baseball player, and really my favorite person that I've ever toured through the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. So when we played on the Sandlot, Nick, it was no dispute. Everybody knew that I was going to be Henry Aaron. Nobody else could be Henry Aaron but me. And to this day, Henry Aaron holds a special place in my heart. And I had a chance to tour him in 1999. His first visit ever to the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. Major League Baseball was celebrating the 25th anniversary of Mr. Aaron breaking Babe Ruth's record. A record, as you well know, that many thought was the greatest sports accomplishment of all time. Right. But it was also a very painful time for him. 1999. I'm sorry, 1974. His family is in hiding during that time. He's getting death threats as he approached this fabled record. This black man in the South about to break this guy who was almost larger than life, white ball player in Major League lore, Babe Ruth. And that didn't sit too well with a lot of people. And, he doesn't know if he's going to make it around the bases as he hits home run 715. And sad to say, it took him 25 years later before he could exhale and actually enjoy one of the greatest sports accomplishments of all time. Well, we fast forward to 1999, and Major League Baseball is celebrating the 25th anniversary of this record. And the Kansas City Royals were participating. They had invited Mr. Aaron to Kansas City, and part of that invitation was to include a tour of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. Well, my dear friend, the late great Buck O'Neill, was out of town. And so guess who draws the assignment of touring Henry Aaron? Yours truly.
There you go.
Yeah, no, Nick, and I'm a nervous wreck, man. This is the only time I've ever been starstruck. And we've had some amazing people tour this museum, from American presidents, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, former First Ladies Laura Bush and Michelle Obama, former Vice President Al Gore, General Colin Powell, a plethora of athletes and entertainers. And as I always say, with no disrespect to any of them, they not Henry Aaron in the eyes of this kid from Crawfordville, Georgia. And so I'm a nervous wreck, man. I'm at home. I'm laying out everything. Everything's got to be just right. You know, my wife's looking at me like, what is wrong with you? You say, I don't think you understand. This is Henry Aaron. And so we get here to the museum and they mic me up, and we've got a throng of media following us. And so it's me, Henry Aaron, his wife, Billy. And we're walking through the Negro Leagues Museum. And Nick, I'm sharing stories with him that he didn't know about, even though he was part of the Negro Leagues, albeit a brief period of time. He's only there for really less than a year in 1952. And so it was amazing. And we get to a photograph of him, and he's standing at the train station in Mobile, Alabama. He must weigh 150 pounds soaking wet. And for those who are not familiar, he started his illustrious professional baseball career in the Negro Leagues in 1952 with the Indianapolis Clowns. So he's standing at the train station with nothing but a duffel bag, getting ready to leave Mobile to go join the Indianapolis Clowns, likely leaving home for the first time. And Henry Aaron comes to the Clowns as a skinny, cross-handed hitting infielder. So he was a right-hand hitter who was hitting with his left hand on top. That, as you know, is unorthodox. The fear is that you break your wrist hitting in that manner. Well, Henry Aaron is knocking the cover off the baseball in a highly unorthodox fashion. When he gets to the Clowns, they put the right hand on top, and the rest, as we say, is history. So we get to this photograph, and he had seen the picture, but it's been a long time since he's seen that picture. And his nickname, before he became the Hammer, with the Clowns, they nicknamed him Pork Chops. And so we were teasing him. We said, well, Mr. Aaron, why did they call you Pork Chops? He said, man, I guess that was the only thing I knew how to order off the menu. So he found something and he stuck with it. And he goes to tell me that when you look at this picture, he's standing at the train station and all he has is this one little duffel bag. And he says, I may have had 2 changes of clothes in that bag, $1.50 in my pocket, and a ham sandwich that my mama had made me, going to go chase that dream. It worked out pretty well for the Hammer. He was shortly after discovered by the Boston Braves, who would become the Milwaukee Braves, who of course would become the Atlanta Braves. Henry Aaron will go down in this sport as one of his all-time greatest baseball players, but it all began in the Negro Leagues. So we finished the tour. We go across the street from the museum to the Gym Theater, which was a fabled old theater back in that era of segregation. You know, virtually every African-American community had a movie theater. That was the one here at 18th and Vine, the Gym Theater. And so we restored the Gym Theater as part of the process of building what we call now the museums at 18th and Vine, which features the Negro Leagues Museum and the American Jazz Museum. So we go across the street, the place is filled to the rafters. And he commenced to have a conversation with Jason Whitlock, who was at that time a national sports columnist for the Kansas City Star, and Joe Posnanski, who was also a national columnist for the Kansas City Star. And it's an epic conversation. I mean, to go back to hear him talk about how challenging that time was in his life was just absolutely amazing. But the grace, class, and dignity which he handled that situation. And if you recall, when he hits number 715, you remember the two guys jump out on the field, and they were,
Right.
yeah, people thought that they were coming to do something to him, although they were just coming to celebrate with him, But that's how involved the situation was. Yes, I mean, just tons of mail that were death threats, and so we finished the conversation. We go up to the mezzanine level, and I get to eat some of that great Kansas City barbecue. Yeah, we got a platter of Gates barbecue. Me, Henry Aaron, and his wife Billy. And for me, man, it just doesn't get any better than that. Sharing a platter of ribs with my childhood idol. And so he's the name that resonates. But as a fan of the game, there were always other players that you enjoyed watching. But for me, no one will be better than Henry Aaron. Nick, even if they are better than Henry Aaron, they won't be better than Henry Aaron in my eyes.
Hey, I hear that all the way. I mean, listen, that has got to be probably one of your remarkable moments, not just as the executive, but just as a human being, to watch a man with such style and grace, a man that we talk about now, how we tell, people to chase your dreams, don't give up, don't, settle for less than. This man exemplified it to the T under some very harsh and really, bad circumstances, to say the least.
Yeah, no, this is Atlanta in 1974, but this is still the South, and people were very vocal about it, and so yeah, and here I am growing up 80 miles from there, and I told him when he circled the bases, hitting home run 715, he's in Atlanta, Fulton County Stadium. I'm circling the bases in my parents' living room right with him, man. The old couch was first base, the old TV was second base. My parents had another old couch that was third base, and my mother's recliner was home plate. So as my childhood idol was touching them all, I was touching them all in Crawfordville, Georgia, jumping for joy. And it's still one of the biggest thrills for me. And when we look at sports overall, that moment in time still ranks as, I think, the most memorable moment in sports for me. And then, like I said, by far the most memorable tour that I've ever given of a gazillion tours of this great museum.
Now, you talk about the great Henry Hank Aaron, but there's another player that I felt like is still one of the most influential players in all of sports. He happened to play baseball, but he changed the dynamic of sports even today, where we're talking about having conversations of where LeBron James would go, where, Kevin Durant would go, where, Mike Trout could leave, or Aaron Judge, or, somebody in the NFL could join the team. But this man made it possible. And to me, I don't believe he gets the true respect and the true admiration that he deserves. And that's the one and only Curt Flood. And Curt Flood playing in the Negro Leagues, obviously, then later on coming up to the Cardinals. What were some of your thoughts? And why don't you think Curt Flood gets the proper respect and just due that he has earned and deserved?
Because they don't know. They don't know. And I tell people all the time, man, you don't know what you don't know. Now, once you know, you should then respond accordingly, which is why we work so hard to get the young athlete into the museum. But all the guys who are making a lot of money playing the game that they love, whether it's Major League Baseball, or NBA, NFL, essentially they owe it to Curt Flood, who challenged the system. He challenged the reserve clause and took his case all the way to the Supreme Court before losing a very hard-fought, somewhat controversial decision, because Curt Flood was very near winning that case. Yeah, we did a symposium on Curt Flood, and it was incredible to learn just how close he was to actually winning his court case. And had it not been for Supreme Court Justice who was friends with Argie Bush, who basically abstained from voting, and then a justice that changed his vote at the 13th hour, Curt Flood would have won that epic case. And it's probably one of the few times, Nick, that the Supreme Court really did not rule by the letter of the law. They ruled emotionally on what would be damaging, they thought, to baseball, or Curt Flood would have won that. But Curt Flood's stance is essentially what started free agency in sports. And he still doesn't get the credit that he justly deserves. Curt Flood should be in the Hall of Fame. And Curt Flood essentially, Curt Flood in many ways was Colin Kaepernick, before Colin Kaepernick. It wasn't a social issue, but it was a work-related issue, and he gets blackballed from this sport. Because you have to understand that Curt Flood was a great player. We're not talking about, as Buck O'Neil would say, we're not talking about some Rudy Poop ball player. We're talking about a great ball player who challenged the system. He challenged the St. Louis Cardinals and refused to be traded to the Philadelphia Phillies. Well, at that time, nobody wanted. If you were black, you didn't want to go to Philly under any circumstances. And so he challenges that because he says, I'm not a piece of property for you to move at your beckoning whim. And, at that time, Curt Flood was probably making $100,000 a year. That's pretty good money back then. And so he essentially lost everything. But as I tell people all the time, when you stand in your conviction, likelihood is you're going to stand alone. You're going to walk alone. And what history always sides with the athlete. Always. Inevitably, history will come back and say, you know what? The athlete was right. Now, that athlete typically loses virtually everything. Muhammad Ali was able to regain much of what he lost. Mm-hmm. But, Ali takes this bold stance and he was vilified. Then years later, he's revered. And he becomes perhaps the most loved athlete of all time because of the stance that he took. And you can go back throughout time, and I guarantee you, when it's all said and done, history will side with Colin Kaepernick. It's already starting to side with Colin Kaepernick and the stance that he took. Now, I don't ever think his situation will be as dire as Curt Flood, because he was able to work at a time frame where you could make considerable amount of money, and the endorsement deals will likely be there for Colin. As I saw today, he just signed a deal with Disney as we're recording this today. Mm-hmm. So, right. I don't know if the situation will be as dire, but he lost his job. He lost an opportunity. He was basically exiled from the NFL for standing up for what he believed. And now everybody understands exactly what he was doing.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, when I think about Colin Kaepernick and what he's lost, I mean, the step that he took, and obviously I don't believe any person that says, hey, this is going to turn into a movement when they do it. They just do it, like you said, because it's the right thing to do. Whether that be Muhammad Ali, whether it be the great Curt Flood, whether that be even Maya Moore, as we saw, a week or so ago, what she did and stopped her career in the middle of her prime. To help to bring awareness to not only that one gentleman, Jonathan Irons, but also to how corrupt and how unfair, the criminal justice system really is. When you talk about Curt Flood, and I know I've seen documentaries, I'm sure you've seen documentaries on him, were there any players that kind of recognized or wanted to gravitate towards Curt Flood? Maybe not so much during that time, but maybe after he lost his case and they realized what he was fighting for?
I think they wanted to the entire time.
Okay.
But what you're dealing with is self-preservation. You know what I mean? You got a family that I got to feed, I got to take care of. I don't want to be the guy that rocks the boat in this situation, because now that can become me. And so while my heart is there with him, I got to think about this other side. And so I think there were a number of guys who wanted to go the route along that path along with him and be there with him as brothers, but they just could not take that stance or that step because of the fear of risking losing the thing that was taking care of their family. And again, I understand the human nature of self-preservation, because that's exactly what it is. And so guys have to make a decision about my livelihood, or am I going to join this stance? And of course, the athlete has a much larger platform today and probably have a little bit more power collectively than they did back then.
Absolutely. Now, Mr. Kendrick, I cannot let you leave here without talking about, because you mentioned his name. I'm gonna get right into him. The great, the legend himself, Buck O'Neil.
Yeah.
I've had an opportunity to read about him in school. Fortunately, I went to a school that we had material that we could read about legends like him, like Josh Gibson, who I consider still the home run king as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Guys like this. Why isn't the Negro Leagues more talked about? I mean, I remember watching TV shows like Rock back in the 90s where Charles Dutton,
Yeah.
right, he was a huge Negro Leagues fan.
Yeah.
You saw even in the 90s where you had people like, Martin and Will Smith and guys like that repping, different Negro League apparel.
I was just watching Rocco
Yeah.
Jenkins come home.
There you go.
Martin,
Exactly.
Monique and Cedric the Entertainer. And in the movie, they're wearing some Negro League stuff that we sent to them.
Really?
Yeah. And then there was Ice Cube in the film Are We There Yet? That was our Satchel Paige bobblehead. That was his compliment in the film. Yeah, so we've had some involvements along those lines, and people are still learning about the Negro Leagues. And when I say that, people may have heard some references, but in terms of the breadth, the depth, the scope, the magnitude, Nick, of what this story meant both on and off the field, people are just learning. They're just learning about that. And I think in large part due to the work that we've done here in Kansas City. The Negro Leagues Museum is in its 30th year of operations. So while we are celebrating 100 years of the birth of the Negro Leagues, we're also celebrating our 30th anniversary as the caretaker of this great piece of baseball and Americana. And it's an amazing story of pride and passion and perseverance and determination, or as I like to say, the refusal to accept the notion that you're unfit to do anything. So I'll show you. Yeah, you won't let me play with you. I create my own. Yeah, I'll create my own. And that's exactly what they did 100 years ago this year, right here in Kansas City, right around the corner from where this museum operates. The building still stands where they signed the documents to start the Negro National League 100 years ago. And then this league would give birth to some of the greatest athletes. I call them great athletes because, Nick, they could have played anything. But back then, you could really only make a living playing baseball. Basketball and football were more or less collegiate sports. So if you were going to earn a living playing a professional sport in this country, it was baseball. And so all the great athletes essentially gravitated to baseball. And so when we tell people that Jackie Robinson's weakest sport was baseball, that gives you an indication of the kind of athlete that we're talking about. And he turns himself into a Hall of Fame caliber baseball player. Yeah, but that was his weakest sport. I think he was a much better basketball, football, track athlete than he was baseball player, and some say an even better tennis player. So there was nothing that Jackie couldn't do, but that was the kind of athlete that you had in the Negro Leagues. And so these guys and women, there were 3 women who played. They could play. And really their contemporaries knew that they could play. And so they create their own. But then when you start to look at the dynamics of this league, you can never reduce this story to just baseball, because the impact that the Negro Leagues had on African-American communities across this country was so profound. Wherever you had successful Black baseball, you had thriving Black economies. And quite frankly, I'm not sure the African-American community realized what it was losing when we lost the Negro Leagues. because we lost that catalyst that was the spark to economic development in those urban communities. And quite frankly, many of those communities died with the loss of the Negro Leagues. And so it's bittersweet from that standpoint, because what was good morally, what was good socially with Robinson's breaking of the color barrier was devastating economically. And as I tell our guests all the time, there's always a cost for progress. And in this case, Black businesses paid a dear cost for what was deemed progress. But it was good for the soul of our country. It moved us in ways in which I don't know we ever fathomed before. And so it was the beginning and the end, however, for the Negro Leagues. It was the beginning of progress, but it also signaled the death knell of the Negro Leagues, as all of a sudden this pipeline of great young Black talent left the Negro Leagues and moved into the major leagues. No replenishing system, so the Negro Leagues would eventually fade off, and just go away. By 1960, it had died, and and so that was the end of the Negro Leagues. But man, it became the heyday for Major League Baseball with an influx of talent that this league has never seen at one time. It has never seen before, and may likely never see again.
You talk about the influx of talent at that time, unfortunately at the hands of the Negro Leagues. When you look at today's game in baseball, there's probably approximately 7% of Black American baseball players that are currently playing in Major League Baseball. Where do you feel like Major League Baseball dropped the ball, and can we ever get it to a point where we'll at least get, let's say, maybe 30% or 35% Black American baseball
You'd
players?
like to be in line with the population. When you think about the percentage of African Americans in this country, you would like to see the sport at least be reflective of that percentage or some percentile in that range, as it was nearly that at its height. There were so many, basketball and football stole a lot of guys away from baseball, and it's still in. And now soccer is stealing that good athlete away from our sport. And I tell people all the time, Nick, the thing you love about baseball is its tradition. It's a very tradition-rich sport. The thing that has hurt baseball is its tradition. Yeah, it has gotten out-marketed by the NFL and the NBA. And we live in what I call a microwave society. We want instantaneous success. We want instantaneous everything. And as you well know, baseball is not instant. It is a slow, meticulous process to get there. Now, the rewards are great once you get there. But, the appeal of playing in the minors doesn't resonate with a lot of people when you're comparing it to the instant glamour of the NBA and NFL. And so baseball and the African American community, I guess, kind of detached itself from our sport. Some of it is socioeconomic in nature, as stadiums started to leave the inner city to go to the suburbs. And of course, you didn't have the mass transportation that allowed fans to go follow them out to the suburbs. The rise and fall of basketball and football in our country. And then our sport went from essentially a blue collar sport to a country club sport. A game that was once played on the sandlots, not played that way anymore. And so when this game became organized, it literally priced a lot of kids out. And so it's so expensive. I know people who are paying damn near college tuitions for their kids to play summer baseball, because that's what you have to do now to be seen. And then the other thing that I think has hurt our sport is the lack of full ride scholarship opportunities at the collegiate level. Even the major successful programs only have a handful of full ride scholarships. So we're only talking about partial scholarship opportunities. So if I come from particularly a single parent home, growing up in the urban core, and I've got an opportunity to get my college education paid for with basketball and football, chances are that's where I'm going to steer my child, even if I love baseball. And so we've got a lot of work to do to play catch up. But what I appreciate is the fact that both Major League Baseball and the Players Association understand that there is a gap that needs to be filled, and that they are not sitting idle on the sidelines. They are creating programming opportunities to help bridge that economic gap that may have prevented kids from playing this sport. And we're excited to be a partner, because you obviously you have to see yourself in this sport. And that's what happens when kids come to the Negro Leagues Museum. They see themselves. We have such a proud legacy in this game. And so when they come to the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, they see people who look just like them, who played this game as well as anyone ever played this game. But not only did they play the game, they owned teams. They were managers, they were coaches, they were traveling secretaries, they were team physicians. They fulfilled every aspect of the business of this game. And so, yes, we want that involvement in our sport as players, but we also want them to understand where the other opportunities lie in this sport. And so we're very fortunate that here in Kansas City, Major League Baseball, Players Association, and the Kansas City Royals, along with the city of Kansas City and the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, are partners on an urban youth baseball academy, modeled after the same thing that had been happening in Spanish-speaking countries for many, many years. And so we're number 7. Dallas has since built number 8, but we're the only one that essentially has a Negro Leagues Museum attached to it. And that's really important. So I say all of that to say that we've got to be patient. And we're not a patient people. We're not a patient society. And we're going to need to be patient. This will get resolved. I think you'll see the numbers start to increase. And of course, first of all, we got to look at kids being drafted. And then we have to look at the minor leagues. So as we start to see the minor leagues more populated with African-American ball players, we can then start to look at and predict to some extent when we're going to see that needle start to change. And I think the more players we see enter Major League Baseball, the more likelihood there is that kids will want to emulate what they're seeing. But baseball needs to be far more vigilant in making sure that these stars are very visible.
Absolutely. Well, you know what? Once again, I can't say this enough. Thank you so much for coming on the program and sharing all of your wisdom, your journey, your knowledge. I could talk to you all day. I know you're a very busy man, so please let everybody know where they can go to join the Tip Your Cap 2020.
Oh, yeah,
and where they can continue to follow you and all of your great work.
Yeah, no, we do. We encourage you to take a photograph or even a short video tipping your cap in honor of the Negro Leagues. You can post them at photos@tippingyourcap.com, or you can visit our website at www.tippingyourcap.com to not only see the scores of people who have already done it and the incredible people who are part of this campaign, but you can also learn how to make sure you upload your picture or video. We want you to be part of this movement to pay honor in this 100th anniversary year of the Negro League.